Good afternoon. I'm here at the home of Vicky Pryce in London. Vicky, an esteemed member of the Qodeo Advisory Board, well known for being an author, an economist. She was chief economist for the UK government and for KPMG, and regular on BBC. And one of Vicky's claims to fame is pioneering women's access to capital. And you wrote a book called Women versus Capitalism, I recall. So Vicky will just say a few things about your views or her views about women's access to capital, issues that women face in the venture capital arena.
Well, just to say, I'm delighted to be attached to the advisory board that you've set up. And indeed, I have written a book on women versus capitalism. And what it is, in fact, trying to say is that the way the market works right now and the free market economy that we think really sorts things out doesn't help women generally at work, in terms of pay, and actually very crucially in terms of entrepreneurship. And that's really why we're having this discussion now. There are all sorts of reasons for this. If you look at the venture capital market, for example, you can see how women are very poorly represented in working in the venture capital industry. So decision making by women matters hugely. And what you find is that when you have a woman making a decision, then a lot goes to women entrepreneurs and to women who've started their own firms. But it happens also at work. You find that if there are decisions made by women, then women who work in that organization also do generally better, not because they're being in many ways sort of pushed in that direction, but because the woman who makes the decision looks at competition and decides that women are just as good as the men, plus of course in many areas, not always, plus of course they act as a role model. So women want to stay longer or do the sort of things, including raising money, that they see other women doing. If that doesn't happen, then obviously the share of women entrepreneurs stays low, the economy suffers, venture capital doesn't go to perhaps where it might get the best results, and we all are poor as a result.
Thanks, Vicky. I mean, we've found on Qodeo that obviously that women's access to capital is a major issue because there are very few women in VC, and the women historically in VC may not come from the same background as some of the women entrepreneurs coming through, so it makes it even harder sometimes for women to get businesses funded. And we've also found on the system that, and we're doing some things with AI and cool stuff to correct for this, what we call course correction, that women typically tend to under-ask when they're raising money, we've seen, and they tend to undervalue their businesses. And of course, the problem with that is if you undervalue your business and you ask too little, you'll end up with the wrong investors, or raising too little, therefore won't have the ambition you should potentially have. So, and that's not always the case, but we found it typically to be the case. So we're trying to find mechanisms within our system to what we call course correct, to adjust and let women know who are putting in typical kind of business that maybe if something is out of step or not quite benchmarking correctly, how they can kind of pull that back in to help them identify capital.
I think that's interesting. That your findings are not necessarily those that you find if you just look at across the board what happens, which is that actually one of the reasons that it's mentioned for women getting less funding is that they put a very good proposition together and they look at it to the end, if you like, what it is that they want to achieve, and might actually, if anything, ask for too much upfront. Okay. Rather than being able to take the risk, if you like, of going step by step and then having the sort of proof of product which you need to have over a period of time. So they seem to want more of the certainty that it's all going to be there. Okay. So, which is interesting. So they are slightly more risk averse, possibly. But what you find also is that the venture capitalists are more risk averse when they have a woman presenting a case, even though the woman more generally, which also happens across all sorts of areas of life, actually prepare a lot better, and their cases tend to be more foolproof, if you like, than the men, with the result, of course, that women enterprises tend, once they get the investment, even though they're not very many, as a percentage, do better on average than those by men. But of course, the sample isn't huge, unfortunately, and what we need to do is expand it as much as we possibly can.
Well, thank you, Vicky, for that. You will hear more from Vicky with us later in the year, hopefully, and including you're going to be a keynote speaker or panelist at our Democratising Venture Summits later in the year, so
Absolutely.
you'll hear more from Vicky about that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you. Look forward.